Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard. Thank you for watching today's Corn Belt Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I'm going to take us to the parts of the Midwest here, parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois, just to kind of recap what happened over the last 24 hours. During the afternoon and evening hours, we saw a couple thunderstorms percolating here, one of which developed into a gorgeous supercell thunderstorm near Omaha. But as I play this loop out, I want to really focus on the left side of the screen. Watch what comes in. Boom. Right there across parts of Nebraska and Kansas. During the overnight, we saw this large bow echo develop, and that continues to race off to the east as we head through the morning hours. We'll zoom in on that in just a moment. But first, here is a shot of that supercell thunderstorm near Omaha. This was taken by one of my good friends, and the guy I normally go storm chasing with, Colin Davis. He's out there without me this weekend and got a great shot of this supercell again near Onawa, Iowa, which is near Omaha. And what you're seeing here is literally the rotation within that thunderstorm, carving out this mothership appearance. And then down here, this is your wall cloud. This would be, if you were going to get a tornado out of this storm, this is where you'd be watching for it. Of course, no tornado with this storm, but it did produce some severe weather as it moved off to the southeast across parts of western Iowa on Thursday evening. But here is that bow echo right now pushing through parts of Omaha. This will eventually move through portions of at least north of Kansas City towards the St. Joseph area, but parts of southern Nebraska picking up on some strong winds during the early morning hours from this. So heads up if you're downstream across parts of southern Iowa into northern Missouri as we head through the morning hours on Friday. Along the leading edge here, this is where you'd get your shelf cloud. If you look off to the west, maybe see it looks like the end of the world. You see the big ominous shelf cloud pushing in. Once that moves overhead, you get the strong gusty winds, that cool whoosh of outflow air from the thunderstorms, and then the heavy rain does follow from that. So again, as we head through Friday morning, heads up southern Iowa, heads up northern Missouri, and then perhaps heads up parts of Illinois as we head into the afternoon and evening on Friday as this thing continues to move on in one fashion or another. We'll take a look at what the high-resolution models say in just a moment here. As we zoom out, take a wider look at the region, here are those thunderstorms across parts of the Central Plains here moving into the mid-Mississippi Valley. We've got other rain activity across parts of the Dakotas and then also parts of Montana picking up on some rain as well, and that extends into parts of the Canadian prairies associated with a larger area of low pressure off to the north. The last 72 hours, we've seen this corridor here. Well, a couple of corridors from the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt. We talked about that in our forecasts here, and then we're beginning to see some rain filling in here where we badly need it from parts of the Dakotas into Montana and the Canadian prairies. Very happy to see some rain over there over the last 3 days. The last 30 days, if we go back to mid to late May, it was this area here that was badly hit, just absolutely clobbered by repeated rounds of thunderstorms. Some parts of Oklahoma, northeastern Oklahoma, southeast Kansas, and southwestern Missouri picking up on 10 to 20 inches of rainfall there during the period there in mid to late May. And then as we headed into the month of June here, really focusing on this area from the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt with those corridors of repeated rainfall. And then, so obviously going to be very glad to see at least this pattern shift a bit and move that heavier precipitation corridor off to the north. Looking at the 5-day forecast from the National Blended Model, and then again, the problem lies within the name there, the blended model. We're seeing the corridor here from the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt continue to see rain activity over the next several days, but we're seeing it broadly paint this 1 to 2 inches of rain across the region, and that's simply not how it's going to fall. We'll see it falling in the fashion that it has over the last few days with these corridors of very heavy rainfall that this blended approach is simply not going to pick up on. Where we will see more heavy or more widespread uniform precipitation falling is across the Canadian prairies into parts of the northern plains, where we're seeing not so much in the way of these strong thunderstorms and these clusters of thunderstorms, but seeing more rain falling near that low pressure area. As we look at the 10 days that follow that, so looking at the very last part of June into early July, what you notice is not much change across the central and the eastern Corn Belt, which is great news. And where we do see the change is across the northern plains into the southern prairies of Canada, where we want the rain, and that is going to be because we build this ridge into the region, into the upper level jet stream support goes with the jet stream into parts of the north. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. We'll look at the week 1 precipitation anomalies. Of course, this is built into the National Blended Model, but this kind of shows the trends from week 1 to week 2. So we're looking at June 20th through, or June 21st through June 27th now. Again, we see the corridor from the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt, and then seeing that corridor across the Canadian prairies into the Northern Plains. But when we look to week 2, So now the end of June, the beginning of July, seeing the heavier precipitation anomalies now from the Canadian prairies into the Great Lakes, but across the Central Plains and the Eastern Corn Belt, where we had the higher precipitation here for the week one period, bringing things at least back down to a little closer to normal. And the precipitation is going to be a bit more isolated in nature as we head again to the last part of June, the early part of July. Checking in quickly just with the temperature trends over the next 5 days, so through June 26th, we've got this trough over the west here, and that's why we've got cooler temperatures in the north and the west. It's been cool, though, even all the way across the central and the eastern Corn Belt, but as we head into the 5 days that follow that, so now again looking at the last couple of days of June here into early July, we build a ridge into the region, which we're going to look at here in just a second. And that brings some heat into parts of the Corn Belt here, into much of the Corn Belt. Finally, going to be feeling a bit more like summer across the Corn Belt. So let's check in first with the high-resolution NAM model and kind of check out what it's got for the next 3 days, and we'll go ahead and we'll step through time with this one and just kind of look at how it's handling the thunderstorm activity across the Central Plains and the Eastern Corn Belt. Doing a pretty good job with the cluster of thunderstorms across parts of Nebraska and Kansas, moving into Iowa and Missouri as we head through the middle part of the day on Friday. Now, unfortunately, these high-resolution models, or I should say, unfortunately, these clusters of thunderstorms just aren't picked up well by the high-resolution models. They do a pretty good job, and they certainly give it their best, but how they're going to behave hours beyond when this model initiates is a bit tricky, and they can sometimes develop a mind of their own. So, as I said, potentially heads up Illinois as we head through the evening, or at least the afternoon and evening hours. We'll have to watch how this bow echo behaves as it moves across Iowa and Missouri, but the high-resolution NAM model taking this into parts of central and northern Illinois later on in the day on Friday, so perhaps heads up Illinois, central and northern Illinois at least, for the potential for some heavy rain and maybe some strong winds depending on how long this thing maintains its intensity. And then as we head into the later part of the day on Friday, heading into Saturday morning hours, watching for the redevelopment of some thunderstorms across the very same regions here of Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, parts of Illinois, now Indiana, picking up on that as we head through the early morning hours on Saturday. And then as we head into Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening, we'll be focusing on parts of the Central Plains, Kansas, and Oklahoma for the development of another potential MCS, another squall line or bow echo. And Saturday evening, seeing the development of maybe some scattered thunderstorms across parts of Iowa as well. And then once again, these things grow upscale. They move off to the east. They move sometimes in erratic ways. But as we head through the early morning hours on Sunday, we continue to watch this same area here. Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois are going to be really the favored areas for the development of these clusters of thunderstorms. We'll take the high-resolution NAM model, we'll play out the accumulated forecast rainfall through Sunday afternoon, and again, it's not going to nail this 100%, but it does a great job of picking up on the pattern. And, we looked at the blended model, and that's where it had that, a uniform 1 to 2 inches of rainfall across the area, and again, the high-resolution NAM model does a much better job of picking up the reality of the situation, and that is, seeing the heaviest rainfall in these corridors where these MCSs, these bow echoes, these squall lines, these clusters of thunderstorms develop and track. So focus in on our favorite area, which again maybe I'll kind of redraw it as this area here. From the central and southern plains into parts of the eastern Corn Belt. This is going to be the favored corridor for those clusters of storms to develop, and you just have to kind of watch it day by day, keep an eye on the radar as we head through, and just keep looking up downstream towards your west for these incoming clusters of storms. So here's a look at the GFS ensemble model. This will kind of paint the pattern as we head through the next few days. Here is our trough to the northwest. Here's that trough over the eastern United States. That's why we've kept things very active, where that jet stream is, where the upper level support is. That's where we get the more concentrated areas of thunderstorms, the better potential for the heavy rain. And here's what happens. We'll just loop this out over the next 2 weeks. And we start to see this pattern shift, building a ridge into the middle part of the country, and that's why perhaps we don't shut things down entirely, but we do see a shift in the way that the precipitation's delivered to much of the Corn Belt. We'll take a look at the same thing here, looking at the European model, taking a closer look here at the 500 millibar height anomalies. Here is the trough to the west. trough to the east, and again, the stronger jet stream winds focused in this area, and that's why we're keeping things very active. But let's play this out as we head through the last week of June, start to build that ridge into the region, and again, taking the upper level support with that ridge. So let's go ahead and we'll look at the winds within the jet stream here. So looking at the 500 millibar jet stream winds, and as we start here on Friday, again, where the stronger jet stream winds are, that's where the stronger upper level support for organized thunderstorms is going to be found. And where is that? Well, it's right here across the Central Plains into the eastern Corn Belt. But let's go ahead and let's slowly step into the rest of the weekend. We continue to see the stronger upper level support focused right in this region. That's why we remain active. We remain alert for these clusters of severe storms, these corridors of very heavy rain as we head through the weekend and then perhaps into early next week. But by the time we get to Wednesday now, Thursday, and Friday, and then Saturday of next weekend, the stronger jet stream winds now well off to the north. And so while we remain very muggy, we remain unstable across the Central Plains into the eastern Corn Belt, the stronger upper level support for organized thunderstorms begins to shift away from the area. So 24-hour precipitation, this will kind of tell the story, and we'll go ahead and we'll step through time with this one as well. Starting off on the Friday, moving through the weekend, where the stronger jet stream winds are, right in this corridor, that's where you're seeing the pockets of the very heavy rain. Off to the north, this is where that area of low pressure is. That's where we're seeing the rain across the Canadian prairies into the northern plains. But we watch this through the weekend here, getting into now Monday morning, and then eventually into Tuesday, we're starting to see things shift out of the region. And now watch what happens as we get into the later part of the week. And where's the upper level support? It's off to the north. And where is the heavier corridors of precipitation? Right where the upper level support is. But take a look off to the south. We remain very muggy, very unstable. We're still going to be seeing beneath this ridge the development of those afternoon pop-up thunderstorms. So some folks here, especially in the eastern Corn Belt in the mid-south, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, we're going to see a shift in the way the rain is developed, but it's going to be in those pop-up thunderstorms as we head through the next few days. The reason for that, we'll take a look at the precipitable water forecast over the next several days, and here's what we see. We're not shutting down the Gulf of Mexico. This is really what I wanted to point out. We're going to be seeing the heavier rainfall lifting to the north with the jet stream support, but with the abundant moisture coming out of the Gulf, and then seeing the very saturated soils across the Midwest here. We're still going to be seeing the afternoon instability, leading to the development of these isolated thunderstorms that deliver. This is where you end up, perhaps your field gets an inch of rain and then your neighbor a mile down to the road picks up nothing. So we shift away from the pattern of the very heavy, concentrated clusters of storms. We'll just quickly play this out. This is the European model forecast here for surface pressure and precipitation for the next 24 hours. Again, just kind of painting the picture where early on here, if we go through the weekend into early next week, still focusing on the Central Plains into the eastern Corn Belt. Then as we get into the later part of next week, into the first part of July, shifting to heavier precipitation well off to the north. We'll look at total accumulated precipitation for the European model here, and again, you see the heavier rain across the Central Plains to the eastern Corn Belt falling over the next 72 hours or so, heading through the rest of the weekend before we kind of lift things off to the north, getting into the end of next week, the very beginning of July. We'll finish now looking at high temperatures over the next 5 days. Again, here's this boundary we've been watching over the last week or so, where it's been the trigger point for these thunderstorms developing during the afternoon and evening. As we head through the next couple of days, we begin to watch that boundary exit the area, and we're going to start to lift some heat into the Corn Belt. So here's your Saturday high temperatures, getting some of that heat, a little taste of that here in parts of Missouri and Illinois. Sunday high temperatures, Monday. And then we'll finish here with Tuesday. This is when we start to lift some of that heat back into the area. This is when we're starting to build the ridge into the area. And so again, as we head to the middle to late part of next week, starting to feel a lot like summer across much of the Corn Belt. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday morning ag forecast video. And then I will have your next Corn Belt regional forecast for you midday on Tuesday. Have a great day and have a wonderful weekend.